Good evening and welcome to tonight's August Board of Education meeting. We hope that tonight we are finding you with power and we're finding you in good health. Can you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We begin tonight's meeting with the approval of the minutes of July 7th, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Next is the approval of the minutes of July 21st, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Approval of the minutes of July 23rd, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Approval of the minutes of July 29th, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, this meeting may be a little clumsy. You may see that we have two board members that are appearing virtually and they are behind me. So I'm going to be looking to the back to get an alert. If any of them raise their hands for a question, I won't be able to see it. So there may be a pause. So apologies for the clumsiness, but that's the way we're going to do it tonight. Dr. Rufo, please, the treasurer's report.
Good evening. As indicated in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end June 30th, 2020 was $93,821,035.04. It also shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled.
Dr. Rufo, you have no audio at the moment.
Okay.
I was just suggesting we test everybody else's mics while we're waiting. No, I meant theirs.
Yeah.
On Zoom.
Can you have everybody that's on the Zoom call just test their microphone, please? Can you please have everyone who's on the Zoom call just test their microphone? Thank you.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Dr. Rufo? Video presentation.
Hello.
Yes, yes, I can hear her here. You can hear her there. What'd
Yeah.
you turn on?
I turned on my audio.
You turned on your audio?
Yeah.
Your audio is on over there.
Yeah.
Right.
So you want? I don't know.
I don't think it's going to through the speakers.
No. Supposed to. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
You want me to mute it here? Dr. Rufo, can you hear me?
I can hear somebody. Is that Steve? Can you hear me?
Let's work on Dr. Rufo. We're working on it. Hold on.
Okay.
Hey, Christine.
Do you want to do the
So what-
superintendent's report and then we'll move on to the treasurer's report?
No, I can hear you on the back laptop because I have my audio open. Okay, so it is on right now, but we can't hear them. I can hear Dr. Rufo, but I can only hear on the laptop here. So it's good. It's good. It's good.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
See if this one gets in.
I can hear you. Just far away.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Dr. Rufo, can you try speaking, please?
Yes. Can you hear me? Testing. Can you hear me? Do you want me to continue talking or can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Rufo.
It's very light.
Can you try speaking again, Dr. Rufo, please?
I will try speaking again. I am testing the audio. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, Dr. Rufo.
Oh, Chris Payne can hear me. She's nodding and so is Fran. And Joe, yes. And Carol and Susan.
The virtual people can hear
The
you.
virtual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Adele.
Just a little bit more information. The live public can hear everything too. It's just the in-person that the audio is not working.
Right. So, yeah, Del, if you could present full screen, great. Thank you. Oh, hello, everybody. We're going to skip ahead in the agenda to my report. Once we resolve some of these audio issues, we'll come back to the other two items on the agenda. Ms. Bavard is going to do a presentation on some of the work that we were doing over the last year and a half on gender equity in classrooms. And we had some young ladies who were part of an initiative called Girl Talk. And we had some presentations. We want you to be able to hear their voices. And so getting the audio right is important to us. So I'll go through my presentation. I guess I'll have to keep looking over my shoulder to see where we are in the slide deck. So obviously we're working hard on getting ready for the opening of school this fall. There's a lot of work to do between now and then. We've been working on this all summer and there's still more to go. You may have seen today that we are on a list of school districts that the state did not have access to our plan. So we rectified that with the state. We did file our plan on the 31st as directed, but there were several locations where it needed to be filed. We filed in almost all of the locations, but there was one that we missed. So we've rectified that problem and we're past it. And we're continuing to move on. The most important thing is that our plan has been shared with our community and the community has had a chance to react to it. So part of what my presentation is going to do is just go a little bit deeper into the kinds of things that we've been getting a lot of questions about. We did publish a lengthy FAQ document built off of all of the questions that have been coming into us over the course of the last several weeks so that we could go and hopefully elaborate on the things that folks need to know. So Ms. Bavard. So I guess from the previous slide, we should just pause long enough to say that the governor did order all schools last Friday to reopen. And that means that for us, we will reopen as much in person as we possibly can, given the limitations of our facilities. And the governor did require us, and we'll have a little bit more information in the not too distant future about when to do some meetings with parents. Obviously, we can see from tonight's events that semi-in-person and semi-hybrid meetings are not easy to pull off well. So we'll think about what the best format is. And I'd like to also collect a few more of the questions that have been coming in so that we can do a good job of making sure that people's questions are answered. Next slide, please. So the infection rate statistics, these are the metrics that the governor's office is using to evaluate whether it is safe to reopen for school. I put these in the slide presentation, both to give you a sense of what the numbers are since the beginning of the pandemic, and then also to show you where the data is located that the governor's office is using to evaluate things on an ongoing basis. So we were required to do 3 plans. We anticipated, based on what the governor had originally said, that he was going to decide among the 3 plans, which we would do, the full in-person, hybrid, or a virtual plan. He said we may reopen. He wasn't specific about whether you should execute a hybrid plan or an in-person plan. So we assume that means reopen to the extent possible. And that's the plan that we have for this fall. We did survey parents. It was important to get that feedback. We did do a lot of crunching of the numbers that we got from parents. Unsurprisingly, the full in-person model was the most popular at all levels, but it's not possible to achieve at the high school because there's not enough physical space to get the physical distancing that's required to do that safely. And so we're not able to do that at the high school, but we are able to do it K through 8. We did look at several different hybrid models, a split day model, a half day model, and an alternating day model. The split day model was logistically not feasible. That's where you do an entire day of school in the morning, 5 hours before noon, and another 5-hour day after noon. And we didn't have the staffing to pull it off. We didn't have, it would be too costly to pull off. And because of the need to do extensive midday cleaning, it would actually end up being much more than a 10-hour day. It might be even longer. And then between the two, half day or alternating day, parents preferred the alternating day. We're doing the alternating day by alphabet so that siblings go to school on the same day. And if there is a need for some childcare at the high school, which I anticipate that most high school kids are not going to require, a custodial parent at home to watch them, but they would be home or at school on the same day of the week. As I said, we did survey parents. We also did a thought exchange. We plowed through a lot of the data and information that we got back from that. A lot of the comments that were in the survey formed the basis of the FAQ document that was shared with the community. So here's been one of the challenges that we've had going into now these final weeks before we start school. We surveyed because we also wanted to get a sense of how to plan staffing for the fall. And we asked our parents what their intention was for whether they were going to send children back to school. In the survey, 27% of parents said that they were not sending children back to school. But now that we've asked parents to make a firm decision, that number has dropped significantly. So I think there's probably several ways to potentially interpret that. You could interpret it as people are waiting until the last second, and I'm sure that there's some of that going on. It could be interpreted that people still have unanswered questions and they're hoping to learn a little more before they make a final choice. Or it may be that what we've communicated about our plans so far has given people a comfort level. So it could be any of those things, but it's significantly below what we had been planning for originally. And that has forced us to rethink a lot of the staffing planning that we've done. So staffing is challenging under the best of circumstances. With the shifting that is going on, it's going to be even more challenging. The same thing is also true of the busing. We had anticipated, based on the survey, that we would have half of families not take advantage of busing. The busing is going to be very challenging. Dr. Rufo, if we can get her audio fixed, is going to talk a little bit more about the busing challenges. But we're going to have buses that are rated for 66 students. And we were planning on not having more than 22 students on the bus. But buses are a finite quantity. There is no giant fleet of buses out there that's been sitting idle for the last 3 years waiting for a school district to come along and take advantage of it. And we were already having bus driver shortages prior to the pandemic. Those two problems have gotten worse, not better, since the pandemic. So the busing is going to be a big challenge for us going into this fall. And, for the benefit of the board, for the benefit of the community, I just want to be very transparent about how challenging that's going to be. So I'm going to let Ms. Bavard talk a little bit about the instructional models. She and Mr. Cardillo have been working closely with the principals at all levels. They're going to be, in broad strokes, the same in buildings at the same level. The elementaries will be in broad strokes the same. The middle schools will be in broad strokes the same. There will be some differences between the buildings. This board has been consistent with me in saying that the board would like to see consistency between the buildings, but there will be some limitations of the physical space that just will not make that possible in the coming year. Obviously, we all hope that we find a way medically to turn the corner from this, and once we do, we'll be able to go back to something that resembles normal as much as possible. But at least for this coming year, we're going to make the best of what we have with the space that's available to us. So Ms. Bavard?
Yes, so thank you. And I'm hoping that you can all hear me from this microphone. So we've been over this plan that elementary, we're very happy to say, is coming back to school if parents so choose that, 5 days a week. Middle school is the same. We've had to shift at middle school from a 9-period day to an 8-period day in order to allow all students to have the staff to staff the program in the middle school. And high school, even though we tried very hard to get 2,100 students socially distanced, just could not find a way to do that. So they'll be attending every other day, as Dr. Rogers said, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So at elementary, we've gone over that the spaces in the building are repurposed. Many spaces are repurposed for instructional space. So when students enter an elementary school, it will look different. There'll be students there'll be a teacher of record, students with that teacher of record. If there are more students in that class that can be appropriately placed in that space, there'll be students in a different space, but still connected to the teacher. And in that second instructional space will be what we call a co-pilot, which will be a certified teacher supervising the students. And we have really taken advantage of the technology that we have so we can have robust instruction in both of those spaces.
Students will pretty much stay in their classroom. They will have breaks for recess, for physical education, outside, weather permitting in the fall. Some of our schools will be able to have their gyms available, some will not. It really depends on the size and the space in this distinct elementary school. So at middle school, we're shifting from that 9-period day to the 8-period day. There will be special area classes, and they will meet all the requirements for the New York State guidelines and really give that comprehensive experience to our students. So students in middle school will take the majority of their courses in what we call the home-based cohort, and that cohort will also serve as your advisory group. Okay, so students will have the opportunity for movement to some special area classes such as PA and music, and teachers will collaborate across the home-based cohorts. So again, taking advantage of technology, we can have teachers teaching in one space, remoting to a student's Chromebook in another space with a certified teacher in that space. And there's a lot of creativity that can happen as we've improved our skill with technology. Lunch and learn sessions, something that the middle school has done for a while, but really developing that now in this environment. And so they'll eat lunch in their cohorts as well and have some activities that will be fun for them during lunch. In high school, we're going to have cohort A. We'll attend on days 1 and 3 and do e-learning on days 2 and 4 in a 4-day rotation. And cohort B.
And so this is what when a student is not in campus, this is what
Hang on 1 second.
an e-learning model will look like. The students, they'll follow their individual schedule from home, okay, and attend all their classes virtually at the normal times. So if we are in person, school will begin at the normal regular school day of 7:39, first period. If you are learning from home and you're either on the alternate day or you've chosen to learn from home, the day will begin at 7:39. Okay, we're just going to follow that regular school day. We're going to really be robust in our expectation for students, attendance, grading, participation, all of that. You'll see when we approve the code of conduct later, there's language to say students must use the district Chromebook, they must be live, they must have their faces showing and really participate in that instruction remotely. Teachers will be teaching in person in the high school and live streaming to students at home. So the teacher's primary focus is on the live students in the classroom, and they'll be seeing those students every other day in person and then really setting them up for the next day in the virtual environment. Extra help will continue as we have had it, so students will be having that individual touch point with their teacher at the high school. Okay, for students who opt for the all virtual instruction, we just wanted to go over this in a little more depth as well. We covered the broad strokes of it, but let's go to elementary. So if you have chosen all virtual instruction as an elementary parent, you'll have virtual classes throughout the day with a certified teacher. The schedule for each of the content areas will vary based on the developmental readiness of the student and the content area itself. What we learned from the spring is that you cannot hold the student's attention in the virtual environment as well. It's kind of common consensus, you can hold it in the classroom. So we're going to try to do that blend of live teaching and then asynchronous activities where the students know that they'll come back and review those asynchronous activities with a teacher. K1, we know that especially our incoming Ks, we have a whole plan because they've not been in school before. They're going to have an abbreviated schedule. Our first grade students as well, we thought about the fact they were in kindergarten, then they experienced the pandemic. So we really have to be kind to our first graders coming in. So we're going to start K1 on a more abbreviated schedule. But our students in grades 2 through 5 will follow a normal school day. It will be sequenced and there will be breaks and lunch, but things will be spaced throughout the day. So they'll have their content instruction, their special area classes, those small groups, extra help, whatever services they get from special ed or ENL will be provided. At the middle school, students will be connected to their home school if they've chosen all virtual to the greatest extent possible. Again, they will follow virtually the same 8-period day as their in-school peers, and they're just going to be participating remotely online. Okay, they will receive mental health counseling, other resources as a student in school. And we're going to get back to that robust expectation for participation, attendance, and grading that we had before the spring. At the high school, same thing. We want to underscore that if you choose all virtual, your student's day will begin at 7:39 with the first period because you're following that regular school day. All students, and this is a bit of a shift for our high school students because we've had many of them bring their own device, right? But to really participate robustly in the instruction, we're going to ask them to use the district issued Chromebook, have their faces visible at all times during instruction, because we have to get back to that expectation for student attendance, participation, and grading. So I do want to make a comment because there was some confusion about a schedule that was posted in our FAQ. If we go all virtual, everybody's virtual, we're not in school anymore, that's when the high school schedule shifts to the later start of 8:30 as it did last spring. And that was at the request of parents. When everyone was all virtual, they had requested that later start for the full virtual environment. So I just wanted to make that note this evening. So Dr. Rogers, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So obviously physical safety is our first priority, and a lot of what we've been doing is designed around trying to make our physical space as safe as it can be. We've made a lot of investments. The board has supported the investments that we're making. There are several items on the agenda for the board this evening about additional robust measures that we're going to take to try and make our physical space as safe as it possibly can be. I think it's also important to say, though, that we cannot eliminate risk altogether. It's not possible to do. Even before the pandemic, there's a risk to opening and operating schools on any given day. There are a lot of things that we do as a school district to reduce that risk, and I think we do a good job of reducing it. These are unknown times. This is an unknown environment. But I do think that we have put tremendous amount of energy into thinking about how our schools are going to function, to being thoughtful about how we take advantage of all of the things that keep people safe, and trying to do the most conservative thing possible in every instance when we can. So the state guidance has 3 things that we can do to mitigate risk, and we're going to try and do as much of these 3 things simultaneously as possible. And the way I think about this is layers of redundancy. The more redundancy we have, the safer we're going to be. So all students and staff will be required to wear masks. We'll have supplies of masks to be available if needed. Obviously, you can bring a mask or face covering from home. All instructional spaces are designed with students, as this space has been, sitting at least 6 feet away from one another. And we're putting desk partitions similar to these on every desk. No one of these things by itself is perfect, but the more of these things that we use in conjunction with one another, the safer that we'll be. So the guidance allows for brief mask breaks during instruction. We anticipate that will happen only when 2 other things are in place, the distancing and the barriers. So here's a picture of a couple of sample classrooms and the sample desk barrier. So the desk barrier still has its protective covering on it. It will actually be fully transparent like glass, but there's the, whatever it's shipped in is on it. But it gives you a sense of what it looks like. And then you have a sense of what the classroom will look like. Again, in a lot of the classrooms, we're removing casework, we're removing bookcases, things that might otherwise have been in the classroom are being removed in order to maximize the physical space that's available for children, so that we can maximize the number of students who can get into our schools, but still do it safely. So the one thing I get a lot of questions about is mask use. And as I said earlier, masks will be required at all times, in hallways, on school grounds. Mask breaks will be brief in duration. Why? Because the Department of Health has a definition for what constitutes a close exposure to someone with COVID. So obviously, we know that there are individuals who are COVID positive but are not exhibiting symptoms, and they represent a risk. So if you are around such an individual for more than 10 minutes, then you will be considered to be a close contact of that person. So you want to keep the amount of time that you do not have a mask on to be less than 10 minutes so that you reduce the possibility that you are someone who was a close exposure. Similarly, in a classroom, saw the picture of what the classroom looks like. If there are brief mask breaks and we say we'll do every other student, then there's now not just 6 feet between students who have their masks off, but 12 feet between students who have their masks off. And then you can alternate. And again, this is all to try and be in the most conservative posture possible so that we keep ourselves as safe as possible. And then the guidance provides that we have to offer an option for students who can medically not tolerate masks. And we do this with a lot of medical issues that students have. There's a process known as the 504 process. And so you have to inform us before school starts that you believe your child has a medical issue and reason why they can't wear the mask, and we'll work you through that 504 process. On the slide, this is a live link. So if once this presentation is posted, you'll be able to click on that link and access the 504 process at school. And this is just more detail about what that mask exception looks like. This is the language that's lifted straight from the state guidance. Couple of things. There are times in the curriculum where it's important to be able to see the movement of the mouth, particularly in the instruction of students who are hard of hearing or who are deaf, or speech therapy. It's important to be able to visualize the lips and see how the lips are moving. There are transparent masks that can be used for that purpose. Are they ideal? No. Are they better than nothing at all? Yes. So we'll certainly make those available to people who are doing that form of instruction. And then finally, the guidance is clear that full face shields are not an adequate substitute for masks. So the problem is that aerosols can go around the sides of those shields much more easily than they can go around the sides of masks. So we will have an inventory of face masks. We will make them available. They'll be at every building. And we're going to start very conservatively with our mask policy, and then we'll wait 30 days, see how things are going. Also see if the guidance changed. One thing that we've been observing all along in this process is that the guidance from the state continues to iterate and change as they learn more about the virus and as they change their approach to how things are done. So we'll be obviously sensitive to whatever new guidance we're given, but we're going to be very conservative in our posture. Similarly, air filtration. Do we have Dr. Rufo, or should I just plow through these? I'm just going to plow through these. So there are a number. This is a school district where some of the facilities were constructed in the 1950s. Some of the facilities were constructed much more recently. We have a range of different kinds of heating, cooling, ventilation units in use in the district. All of them are different. All of them tolerate different kinds of filtration equipment. So obviously, if you can remove particles from the air, and you can remove them at such a fine-grained level that you can remove things even as small as viruses, that would presumably reduce the potential for something that's circulating in the air to make someone unhealthy. There's, in the literature that I've been reading, some debate about whether this would be successful, but there's no reason not to try. So what we're looking to do, and we're working with an HVAC engineer, heating, ventilation, air conditioning engineer, to determine what the most robust filter that will work in every one of the different kinds of air handling units that we have and go to the maximum level. Now you might say, why can't you just do MERV 13 and everything? And the answer is because the finer the filter, the harder it is to push air through it. And there may be filters that are so fine that the equipment literally doesn't have the horsepower to push the air through a filter that fine. So we'll do the densest, finest filter that we can with each of the pieces of equipment that's in place. We are doing a large air conditioning project this summer. We've been working with the manufacturer to upgrade the filters. The order was placed before, obviously, all of this happened. So we've been working on changing the filtration that's in there to maximize what we can do with the new units that we're purchasing. So one of the things that's on the board's agenda this evening is to grant me emergency authority to be able to do some rapid purchasing procurement of projects to do more air filtration upgrades. So we've identified 3 priorities. The first priority is to take our nurses' stations and the isolation rooms and turn them into negative pressure systems. What does that mean? In a hospital, you have a negative pressure system, which means that in a room that might be contaminated, instead of having air go out from that room, that is a room from which air is exhausted to the environment. So we call that a negative pressure room. Air from the building will go into that room, but it'll be exhausted out of that room instead of the other way around. So for obvious reasons, the nurses' station, the isolation rooms will be upgraded. The second is that there are a lot of interior rooms that we'll need to use for instruction, and some are used as office spaces. The guidance requires us to have fresh air in those rooms. And so we will have to provide ducting in order to get air into those rooms. So that's our second highest priority. And then lastly, we have classrooms that are compliant with the fresh air requirements, but they're not efficient because the fresh air requirements are met by having the windows open, but we may be air conditioning those rooms at the same time we have the windows open. It makes the air conditioning inefficient, but we can have a comfortable room and we can have adequate fresh air. But we'd like to get to a point where we can have fresh air in those classrooms without having to do it in an inefficient way. But obviously that's our third priority. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have some significant challenges with the bus routing. We are doing what we're calling low density routing, trying to have as few students on the bus as possible, but we also know that there are limitations on just the amount of busing that we can do. If it is not possible to do all of the busing in one run, it may mean that we're required to do what we call double loops. So a bus may have to go through the neighborhood once and take its full load, its full reduced load of students, and then return to the neighborhood and go through the neighborhood again. Obviously, if we get to a place where we're doing double loop runs, busing will take more time. The start times for the schools are all very kind of tightly scripted, particularly in the morning. So that will become a challenge for us. We have not solved this problem yet. And the surprise of having so many fewer people opt out of the busing is going to make this a little bit more challenging. At the high school, we're looking at, on the one hand, we have a lot of car traffic at the high school. On the other hand, we're going to have half as many students at the high school. So we know that there's a lot of traffic, particularly on Southwoods Road. We're trying to look for other drop-off possibilities so that we can take some of the pressure off the high school loop. I do think that only having half as many students on any given day will help, but we may need to do more to help that so that the traffic in the high school loop is not as bad as it can be sometimes. The state guidance requires us to identify COVID testing sites. The governor has said a number of things about school districts and testing that are a little bit at odds with what we've seen in the state guidance so far. So we've been looking to get a little bit of clarification on that. But in the meantime, we have started contacting local urgent care facilities to see what kind of testing capabilities they have, so that we have places to refer people. If a student, for example, has a temperature during the day, we should send them out and have them evaluated, hopefully to rule out the possibility of COVID. These would be the places where they might go. And as I said at the bottom, we're also, and this is in the FAQ as well, there's 2 different pieces of guidance from the CDC and the State Department of Health that appear to be at odds with one another about whether we must require a negative COVID test before returning a student to school. The DOH guidance appears to say that a negative COVID test is required. The CDC guidance says that they don't believe that school districts should require the test. So that's an important clarification for us to get before we start school. Daily health screening. Everyone who's here in person had their temperature taken by our lead nurse on the way in. And everyone who works for the school district is filling out an attestation every morning that says that they have not experienced any symptoms and are not at risk of having COVID for a number of reasons, including traveling out of the country or traveling out of state. So once school starts, the expectation will be that parents will, on behalf of their children, or their older children can probably do this themselves, do a similar attestation. Take your temperature before you come to school. Take your temperature before you go to the bus stop. And I'm just going to pause here parenthetically and say, this is a place where we all have to take care of one another. The decisions each one of us make will affect others. So if a student isn't feeling well, a couple of aspirin and tough it out is not the right call. If a staff member is not feeling well, a couple of aspirin and tough it out is not the right call. What we'd rather do is be more conservative, more careful, and the decisions that we make really do affect everyone else. And this is a place where I was reaching for a metaphor, and the best I could do was a barn raising. A barn raising is where the whole community comes together and everybody works hard, and then something is achieved because everybody's working hard, everybody's working together, and everybody's working with the same goal. I think that's the closest we can come here, is to look at this as a barn raising. We're trying to raise a school. And the way we're going to do this is if we all pull together, we all help each other out. This was in the last series of slides for the board, so I'm not going to linger on them. I left the slides in here because I know that people click on the most recent board meeting, and so we can go through the protocols for suspected confirmed cases. You can just go through these slides. I just wanted them to be repeatedly available so that if somebody didn't go back into the archive, they would still see them. Contact tracing, stop here, please. So we've had several staff members take the Johns Hopkins University contact tracing course. I was speaking with the county health commissioner, and he said he thought it would be a great course for anyone to take, not because we're going to go into the business of becoming contact tracers ourselves, but because the theory of how you trace contacts is really about this theory of how the disease is transmitted. And the better you understand how the disease is transmitted, the easier it is to protect yourself from the disease. But it's also easier to understand what does and doesn't constitute a contact, and that demystifies some things as well. Our role, as I understand it right now, and again, the guidance may change, is that the county health department is going to be the lead agency for contact tracing, and they are going to be on the other side of a privacy wall. So they are empowered and authorized to know who they're tracing from as a positive case. We are not empowered and authorized to know who that positive case is. We may know because someone may come to us and say, "Hi, I'm Joe Smith, and I tested positive and I need you to know." And then we'll inform the county, and we'll obviously do what we have to do at our end. But if the county gets notification from an urgent care that they've tested someone and that someone is positive, the county in all likelihood may not tell us who the person is. They may instead ask us to support their contact tracing by saying, "Mrs. Smith's second grade class, we need the class roster for Mrs. Smith's second grade class." And then we would provide them with that class roster. They may need us to give them contact information for all of the other children who are in that class. So what we're going to do to support them is make sure that our class lists and schedules are in good shape, always up to date. We have accurate contact information for parents. If we have visitors, and we should have very few, but we will log those visitors, time that they were here, where they were here, contact information for those visitors, and our attendance records, who was in that day, who wasn't in that day. All of these things are going to become very important for the contact tracing efforts. So what's next for us? Final slide. There's a lot of work between now and September. We're in the process now, and this is part of the reason why we need to have a final date at which people make a decision about whether they're going to take advantage of the virtual school that we're building or the in-person school, is so that we can start to develop class lists and assign students to teachers. This takes a long time in a normal environment. It's going to be extraordinarily challenging in this environment, and we've given ourselves very few weeks to do it. Second problem, bus routes, same issue. Third, we're continuing to refine the instructional plan. We're doing more curriculum development. We know that there's the potential that we'll have to return to the all virtual environment. We want that to be as good an environment as possible. We've done this summer already a lot of curriculum writing. I think there's still plenty more that needs to be done. We plan to do that right up until the first day of school, if at all possible. As I mentioned earlier, we still need some additional guidance from either the county or the State Department of Health on some of these quarantine protocols where I feel they're not clear enough for us yet. And then, and I already addressed this, the instructional models and the work that we're doing there. So that concludes my report. And if Ms. Bavard is able to do her presentation, or the board would actually like to ask me
If
questions.
we could ask you questions first before we move on to another presentation, that would be great. So are there board members who have questions based on the superintendent's report? Anna, did you have a question? Rob?
Yes, Dr. Rogers, regarding the bus routing, you indicated that the actual parents opting out of the busing is, I think, about half of what we thought it would be. Is there any way would it help the district if we knew whether there were families that wanted to just opt out of either the morning route or the afternoon route? I know that there are a lot of students who, get driven to school in the morning every single day, but they'll take the bus home.
Steve, is it possible to have Dr. Rufo answer that question? So Dr. Rufo, we're going to see if we can have you answer this question.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Trish.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I believe the question is it helpful if there's students who want either the morning or the afternoon? And I know that some parents have reached out to our transportation supervisor. That doesn't necessarily help us because it kind of complicates things a little bit more than is helpful, because we do have to route both for the morning and the afternoon. So and again, I believe that her guidance has been that if we're routing for the afternoon, we're going to route for the morning, and it does complicate things in other ways. So we sort of need a commitment for the morning and the afternoon.
Okay. I just want to mention that when I'm picking up my phone, I'm not texting my friends. I'm receiving messages from board members. The masks are masking my ability to see if someone's alerting me to something. And in addition, I have members behind me. So please don't be put off by the cell phone. So I'm going to call on Susan Falco, who is behind me.
Hi. So a lot of feedback that I've been getting in regards to the bus issue is that people are not intending on using the bus to start, but and often don't use the bus in general, but they're hesitant to commit to not doing the bus for the entire year. And I know it presents a problem to start the bus routes one way and then halfway through the year fix it. I think that's partially what the differential is between who said they were using the bus and then who said that they weren't. I don't know if there's any way to resolve that to allow people a chance to opt out in the beginning, and then maybe if the numbers get better or something happens, they can opt into the bus at a later date. But I think that a lot of people are very afraid of opting out of the bus for the entire school year. So I didn't know if there's any way to modify how long they're opting out of the bus for.
Well, we can certainly look at that. I won't put Dr. Rufo on the spot with that because what we have done is we've looked at for elementary school having students who opt virtual to start come back to the live on a trimesterly basis. That's what the marking periods are at the elementary school. We're doing quarterly basis at the middle and high schools. And I think I would certainly need to go pretty deep with the transportation department to see what that would look like. it's hard to overstate the complexity of the transportation piece. It's all tough. The transportation piece is incredibly tough.
I'm sure. Can I ask another question? Not about busing? Trace?
Not about busing? Sure, go ahead.
So I've also been getting a lot of feedback about if children quarantine, not so much in the high school where they can log in for the live feed of their class, but in the elementary and the middle school, if people feel they need to quarantine for whatever reason, there's so many reasons why people would want to quarantine for exposure or because they're going somewhere and they have to quarantine for their safety for others or a variety of reasons. How do the elementary and middle school, because it's such a significant amount of time, it's 2 weeks, how will the elementary and middle school children get their work? Are they going to log into a virtual class or will their classroom teacher provide them with the work? I've been getting that question a lot.
So I'll ask Ms. Bavard to address that question. She and Mr. Cardillo are the instructional leaders in this model.
So at middle school, that would be a more fluid environment, and the middle school has shifted its focus. So they wanted to design a system that could be easily, seamlessly transitioned as the high school is between the in-person and the virtual environment. At the elementary, it is very different, and we are still just trying to finalize the numbers at elementary of students in the virtual school. So we don't have all the answers at elementary on August 10th, but we have heard that question. We do know that we need to service students that need to quarantine, and we will be getting answers to that in the next week or two.
Thank you.
Chris DeFilippo?
Dr. Rogers. One is cancellation. Is it working now? So I was talking about the class size. First it was 4 to 6 inches. That the ratio that will it be, you know, in the 26 to 28 range or something? Will it be more because you have physical blended? And I have the concern that how will the students that are doing virtual, you know, get the attention that they need if they have a question or they want to participate, much like we're doing right here, which is, you know, challenge.
The answer to the class size is we're going to keep the class sizes as they are. And what the high school is doing right now is they're literally going through all of the classes, and there are probably 1,000 classes at the high school. And that's not an exaggeration. I think that's probably a rough number. And they're looking at all of the kids that would normally be scheduled in that class. And now they're obviously breaking it by alphabet and trying to make sure that they have even splits where if there are 26 kids in the class, it's as close to 13 and 13 as possible. It might be, you know, 12 and 14 or something like that. It won't break evenly. But the idea is to try and make those two cohorts, those two sections as balanced as possible. So that may mean that what was geometry on fourth period is actually going to be geometry sixth period because we needed somebody from the second half of the alphabet to balance things out. Oh, I'll repeat the question. Mr. DiFilippo asked if our class sizes would change because of the possibility of having hybrid instruction. And the second part of the question was, how will the teacher recognize and interact with the students who are participating virtually? So on the latter half of the question, we're going through a lot of effort to put teachers and students physically together. And my worry is that we don't take full advantage of that effort if the teacher is distracted by trying to manage the online environment. So I also think that that's going to be very challenging to do, at least at first, until people get more accustomed to teaching in that model. So the primary attention is going to be focused on the students who are right in front of the teacher. And because the students will alternate every other day, the students who are in the off day e-learning will have the advantage of being in person the following day. I do think over time, we're going to get better at doing this. I think at first it's probably going to be a little bumpy. And back to the barn raising metaphor, the first couple of weeks of this, the busing is going to be bumpy, the classroom is going to be bumpy, the parent drop off in the circle is going to be bumpy, the temperature taking is going to be bumpy. The first couple of weeks, it's going to take a little bit of time to shake the bugs out of this. And we've been talking with our teachers. They're also anxious to make sure that the kids in the virtual environment have a good experience, but they also want to make sure that they're focusing on the kids that are right in front of them as well. So that's going to take some time. We have been talking about how we can use co-pilots, other staff to supplement for the kids who are in the virtual world so that they're getting some interaction or someone to answer their questions as well. That is not fully fleshed out yet.
The other question, thank you, Doctor. The other question I have is, glad to have seen it in the presentation with the 504 process. I touched upon this in the last board meeting. If you recall that I was concerned for students who might have some medical, concerns or issues. So when they use that process and that gets triggered, we know how it works well in physical, in the normal class and the previous years that we've had. But now, if we get a number of these students, do we know yet the mechanics of where they will go and how that will happen? Because let's say they have a medical condition, for whatever reason it is, but it requires, they can't tolerate the mask on the face all day, or they need to be more distant with other people because let's say a student has diabetes and they're very much that's just one thing that is sticking with people that I work with at home.
Yep. So the 504 process is a very individualized process. Sure. So Mr. DiFilippo asked how the 504 process will work and how we'll evaluate and what kinds of accommodations might be available to students that need an accommodation. So the 504 process is a process the school physician can be involved in that process. It's an individual process. It goes through administration, needs to be done prior to the start of school. And it may be that the accommodations that a student gets are some additional distance or an alternative type of face covering, but it will not necessarily be the elimination of face covering. It may be finding an accommodation that works for whatever that student's need is. And I can't say what it's going to be because it will differ based on what the issues are with every individual student. Obviously, we will try to engineer those accommodations in a way that is as discreet as possible and doesn't draw attention to students. It may not be possible to do that in every case, but we'll certainly make our best effort.
Dr. Rogers, with respect to extra help at the high school, are teachers going to make the live extra help available for both cohort A and cohort B? Or will they have one extra help session and whoever is at home, it will be live streamed?
I know Ms. Bavard was working on this with Charlie, so
Yes, we have been discussing how to configure the extra help so all students can participate. Again, we are sequencing these tactical answers, so this is under discussion. We do have it on top of mind that we do want to structure extra help in a way that virtual students get what they need, in-person alternate day students get what they need. And we don't have all the answers, but we do have great minds thinking about it, and we'll have the answers in the next week or two.
Very good, thank you. Chris Ulrich?
Right, thank you. All right. So with regard to the busing issue, one thing we can potentially do at the high school that we had discussed months ago is we've now got the paved side road between Southwoods and the bleachers with a loop at the end. And if we can encourage parents in the northwest side of the district to perhaps come in that way, go through the loop and drop off the kids at the back of the school, there is an entrance there that would alleviate some of the pressure at the front of the loop. With regards to the desks, and I know there's a lot of concerns about the masks and kids being able to breathe, take the breathing breaks. Just to avoid disruption, if we could designate red desks and white desks and just alternate them with a sticker, and then teacher can say, red kids breathe. Take off the mask, breathe for a minute, because I could see a lot of interruption, especially with the younger kids. Is it my turn? Is it not my turn? Just to simplify it and make the teachers' lives easier and for the kids. My question is with regards to the high school, and I know we have to break the students into cohorts, and half are coming on one day, half are going on the other. Is there something that we can do to make an effort to be able to schedule kids in a cohort with friends or people they know? Because for the kids who are, they're all going to be home every other day. And there are many families where the parents are working and there's nobody home to watch the kids. And there will be situations where perhaps there's one parent home where two kids can come over and they can do their virtual learning together rather than being home unattended. It'll also address the social emotional issues, the kids feeling like they're in isolation. You know, they're very anxious to get back to school, etc. So if we can create something so that on the days that they are at home, if they can be with one or two people, if the families so choose, that way the parents can return to work. They can do what they need to do to support the family, and you don't have a child left home alone all day.
So 3 points. First, the busing entrance in the back. We have asked, there's a contractor on site doing site work right now at the high school, and we have asked that contractor to give us some pricing for paving from the circle that's being created behind the bleachers at Southwoods to the tarmac that is right outside where the pool and gym entrance is. That would allow us to do two things. Cars could go onto that tarmac area and then drop off by the gym entrance and then come back out and go through Pell Lane as opposed to Southwoods Road. And even on Southwoods Road, that would allow a car to simply go around the waiting for the loop in front of the high school, go up to the tennis courts, go down Pell Lane, and then go down behind the bleachers and drop off. No waiting, and certainly not waiting on Southwoods Road. So waiting to go through that pricing, and if it looks like it's an attractive thing to do, we might move forward with it because the contractor's already on site and mobilized and they have the equipment there. So that's a very real possibility for the fall to reduce the traffic. And that will also reduce the number of students going through the front entrance at the same time by giving us a second entrance to the high school. So for both those reasons, I think it's a good idea. And also on the subject of good ideas, I like red desk, white desk. So we'll float that by the elementary principals. That may be something that catches on. Lastly, I've just been hearing from Ms. Bavard and Mr. Cardillo about how hard the splits have been to try and get the classes. We have a bunch of constraints on the classes right now. There are a bunch of singleton classes. No two kids have the same schedule. And we're trying to get the two cohorts, the live and the virtual, to be roughly balanced. And we're already struggling with that. I don't know if I add an additional constraint on, which is some sort of request for, having kids in a class together. I just don't know if that ends up being too much to pull off. You can certainly talk with the high school staff about it, but my guess is that that's going to be very difficult to achieve.
And is the schedule a manual process or it's a system that generates?
No, the master scheduling is, there are a bunch of things about master scheduling that are sort of always the same. And then the individual scheduling that goes into that, some of that is automated, a lot of it is hand scheduled, and it is incredibly time consuming. And in an earlier job in my career, I was helping another school district do theirs because they had collapsed. And it literally for a similar size high school, took us the entire summer. And I had recruited staff from another BOCES to help us do it. And it still took all summer. It's hard to overstate how challenging that process is. So there are some classes that can only run one period because there are just only enough kids to take the class once. And so that class is fifth period. And if there's something else you want to do fifth period, if you want that specialized art class, you're going to have to give up the photography class because they both run fifth period. Things like orchestra, band, the large group ensembles also really drive a lot. And again, you have to move the whole schedule around these events where you might have 100 kids participating. So then there are some classes where there's plenty of geometry classes. So those are a little bit easier to move around, but a lot of the electives or AP classes are going to be close to impossible. That's my guess off the top of my head.
Dr. Rogers?
Sorry, were you finished? Okay, Anna.
Hello? Can everyone hear me? All right, so I have quite a few questions, but I guess I'll start with at least two. So one being, I know that we involved, we seeked a student's feedback initially. And I recall, Dr. Rogers, you were mentioning that you will do the same this time around. Is that scheduled?
Yeah, I know that we talked about this at the last meeting, and I have lost track of where that was. So, Ms. Bavard, I'm just keeping it completely transparent. I've lost track of where it was. Ms. Bavard, do you know where the?
Oops. We have discussed it. We haven't formalized the plan for the student input for tonight, but that's another thing that we are discussing.
Okay, so I'll take that as a to-do item. I'll share an email with you about how we plan to move forward on that. We'll have that for you before the end of the week.
Right, thank you, because I think it's very important because they're going to be on the receiving end of it all. And so I think it's very important, especially at the high school level. Second, Chris stole my question partially. In the for the mask breaks, specifically during instruction. I mean, the color coding of the desks seems like a nice idea, but in general, is it really, are we leaving it up to each teacher in each class? And are we limiting it at 1 10-minute break per class? And how exactly are we ensuring that the instruction is not going to be disrupted constantly? And now the teacher has a dual job of explaining the material or, timing the 10 minutes. I mean, how is it going to physically look? Is it going to be a uniform policy and guidance to each teacher, or is it going to be up to the discretion of each teacher? And how is it going to play out during instruction in the classroom?
Yeah, this isn't about a personal preference, and so it's not going to be at the discretion of individuals. This is about our best understanding of how this disease is transmitted. And so we're trying to put all of our classrooms in as safe a posture as possible. We'll give instructions to teachers. Teachers generally have their lessons planned down to the minute. They want to have a mini lesson. They know exactly how long that is. They're going to have students work in groups for a certain amount of time. We were actually talking with teachers about how they would manage the virtual, and they were going to put countdown timers on for the virtual for when they're doing small group work so that everyone knows when they're going to come back to the main session, the closure activity. But every lesson has different parts of the lesson. And so this will be something that teachers think about as well. If it's a third of the group, or the red group and the white group, they'll have that planned into their lesson. I'm very confident our teachers can manage that.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Rogers, with PE, when it is not possible to be outdoors due to weather, what are the students going to be doing inside the gym?
Ms. Bavard, thank you.
The PE staff has been working on this and has developed many low contact activities that they will be doing during that time. So that there has been summer curriculum development on that, and ideas have been created for PE teachers.
Will that be in the gym setting? Will they be
Well,
doing activities or
so-
more learning?
That's a good question, and there is not a one-size-fits-all answer to it because every school is different and all the spaces are different. But each principal has space designated for PE when they cannot go outside, and there are low contact activities they will be engaging the children in at those times.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions with respect to the superintendent's report? Okay, thank you. We have the next presentation as Adele's. Okay, Ms. Bavard, looking forward to this one.
Okay, so I just need to know if Teresa Burke can present the screen because that's, oh, here she is. Okay. So I'm so happy to be able to speak this evening on this topic. This is my last board meeting with you as deputy superintendent, and I have learned so much from serving in Syosset schools. And this quote actually is something that I have learned from Syosset. And I've been in this space about women, leadership, gender equity for many, many years. I've had a long career. And I've really learned this, the notion of women's leadership begins in our K-12 system. If you've worked with me at all, you know that I always say it's about the system, right? And I'm so excited to be able to share some things with you that we've developed in Syosset, and to share with you how that work is going to continue in the years to come. But we really want to focus on our girls finding their confidence and their voice in K-12 education to be leaders. So let's look at the context, because the current state of women in leadership, every profession, there's about approximately 20% of female leaders at the top. I've been one of those females that's been the first in a leadership position. So I know what it takes to kind of change the perception of female leadership and get to that top spot. And I know that there's a lack of role models, and that's cited in the research because it's every profession. We talk about corporate professions, the legal field, university professors, medicine, STEM and IT. STEM and IT are being talked about nationally as careers for women, where they really want to see women increase. But that there are not that many mentors, and that's been cited in the research. So let's look at education. If we look at education, we hold 76% of the teaching positions, but really in the administrative roles, there's women in special programs in elementary. If you look at secondary and superintendent, you see about that 20%. So lots of room for growth. I've worked for years in the space of New York State women in administration. So I am proud of this work. It is my second tenure as the chair of the board of New York State Women in Administration. We are the largest organization in this space in New York. We're grassroots, men and women in this space. And we really seek equity, inclusion, tolerance, diversity, and fair treatment for all. I joined this group when I was thinking about being an administrator and have worked throughout my career. I'm proud to say there are affiliates all around the state. And since I've been in Long Island, we have a Long Island chapter, and it's growing strong. And this is important because this is a tough slide to see. And if you look at these bullets, it's kind of like you have cognitive dissonance with, is this really true? Is this how women are perceived as leaders? But it is. I've seen these perceptions that remain about women as less visionary, less comfortable with self-promotion, being too assertive, not really being socialized to be have that competitive edge as a leader. And many of us get discouraged and drop out along the way. So I've seen this in my work with leaders, I've seen that the majority of leaders are male. There's a comprehensive study that McKinsey Group has done over 5 years. In 5 years, they've studied 600 companies. They've had 250,000 people involved. The 2019 study had 329 companies involved, 13 million people, and they identified this broken rung. And when you think about it, if all of the top jobs are, if the gender inequity is at the top, you have to keep going down to the jobs and saying, where are people entering? And how do we get the entry positions more balanced so that we can have more balance at the top? I've been doing a lot of thinking about this equity issue. And when you look at the challenges of equity, every single challenge begins with a broken pipeline. So we have a lot of work we can do in strengthening the pipeline to achieve equity in all areas. So the National Science Foundation, STEM and IT, really fields where lots of progress can be made with women in these fields. They did a study to really talk about balanced teams, because there's lots of just solely male teams in this space. So they developed an algorithm, a collective intelligence algorithm, and they found that when there's a presence of one female on an all-male tech team, just introducing one female into that space raises that algorithm, raises that collective intelligence quotient of the performance of the entire team. So that's an important study, and it's just good to keep that in our minds as we do this work. Some of the other national studies, we see that in the pipeline, when there's a list of women need that confidence when they see a job to say, why shouldn't I apply? The first question women often ask themselves is, why should I apply? Am I qualified? And the studies have shown that if there's 10 criteria, women want to meet all 10, while men say, hey, I got 2, I got 3 criteria, I'm going to apply for that job, and they take the action to apply. Hewlett-Packard did a major study on this, and they found that women hold back. Until they have 100% of the criteria, men will put their application in with 60%. So that's something to learn as we move forward. So a frame that we use in this work is appreciative inquiry. And when you think about it, when you focus on strength and you build from your strength, it's generative, it's growth, and it's that shift of focusing on what you're not good at and saying, I've got these weaknesses I've got to fix. So as we developed work as a system, we talked about really focusing on the strength of our girls and calling out the best that we see in them. Dr. Kristen Neff, if you're interested at all, if you're a reader like I am, I'm always good for a book recommendation. Look her up. She has wonderful work. Take the test, selfcompassion.org test, because it will show you your strengths, and it's very insightful for anyone. So where do we begin in Syosset, right? So you come into a district, you manage by walking around. We have fabulous programs at the high school. And we had done some resourcing in our business and our tech. And so we were walking around and looking at the spaces. And I observed, where are the females in these classes? Because at that time, 4 years ago, there was predominantly males in all of the business and all of the tech. When we talked to the girls about it, they said, you know what, it's first of all, if I'm interested, I don't want to be the only girl. And second of all, these classes can be really competitive and sort of male dominated, and they just didn't have the confidence to apply. So we thought we can do something about that. We found that it's not just a Syosset issue. I mean, the Girl Scouts have done a lot of work on this, and really say that at 11, 81% of girls are interested in STEM careers, but by age 15, only 13% will put it as their first choice, because in those years, they get discouraged and they drop out. So we said, we want to challenge that. We want to change the experience. So we started the conversation. We just got minds together, the people that were interested, and created a task force. And we really wanted to change the narrative to address that gender imbalance. So we went to work on our course catalog. I am very proud of that work. It's online. Please do click into it. Please do look at the business and tech offerings. You will see intentional focus on words that are gender balanced, pictures that are gender balanced, and the way of introducing those courses to our students. And Kid Oyo, starting in 2nd grade, was one of the most brilliant things we did for the pipeline, and that was a team effort. We introduced that coding platform, and you will see it at elementary. There are no barriers, right? Everyone can create their own coding platform. The girls have made it their own, the guys have made it their own, and it's wonderful to see that kind of strength coming into the middle school. In the middle school, we reimagine the technology, and we have now girls coding robots. It's very equal, and so we're very confident that moving those students up to the high school, we're going to see everything really completely change. But I want to introduce a colleague, Teresa Burke, to talk about the work that we've done in Girl Talk. This is intentional, and this was really to get our students involved and get their voices heard. So Teresa, would you take over now?
Hi, yes, good evening. Thank you, everybody. So Girl Talk has been one of my most favorite committees I've been on for the last 4 years. This started with the girls developing the acronym themselves, Grow, Inspire, Reach, Lead. We had students also design the picture that you're looking at. The saying that we have is that we at Girl Talk believe in the importance of empowering young women to develop the confidence in their ability to be leaders, and that it's their mission to educate and inspire our future female leaders with core values, attitude, and skills that are the foundation of quality leadership, which allow for valuable contributions to the society. And the girls worked on this our first year to develop this mission statement for what we want Girl Talk to be. So over the last 3 years, we've worked very hard. In our first year, we had a Women in Leadership speaker series where we had Ms. Catherine Salarzo, who was Vice President of IBM Global Business, speak to our students. And then on our second event, we had Ms. Carrie Kirkman, who was the co-founder and CEO of Likeable Media, speak with our students. And as well at that event, we had a panel discussion with women from our community who worked in STEM and business careers that answered questions and shared their stories with our girls, grades 6 through 12. In 2018, we had a invitation to visit the Barclays Center to listen to Michelle Obama speak. And then we also had Ready, Set, Code Night, where it was a night of coding for girls taught by our own students in grades 6 through 12. The girls taught their parents how to code and other girls in the district how to code. And then in 2019, just this spring, we had a power brunch with women from STEM and leadership careers, where the girls were able to choose who they wanted to hear more information about and rotate throughout these careers. So here are some pictures of our events throughout the years. As you can see, what's most important is that the girls are taking the leadership roles. They work on planning the event, they run the event, and they take care of everything throughout the event. So how has this impacted what we have worked on? So that in 2017, we had 10.6% of our technology course female. By 2019, we had 65% of our technology courses were taken by females. So over 2 years, we were able to increase our female students in technology classes by almost 6%. And then in business, from business to 2017 to 2019, we were able to increase the number of female students by 1%. What I'd like to do is share some words from two of our current members of the Girl Talk who want to share with you how Girl Talk has impacted what they have done at the high school. So first we have Emma Van Dorn, who is going into her senior year at Syosset High School.
Hi, my name is Emma Van Dorn, and I'm going to be a senior in the fall. Joining Girl Talk in 9th grade was honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made. Girl Talk has given me so many opportunities to learn and grow that I never would have gotten otherwise. Since 9th grade, we planned so many successful events like a Women in Leadership speaker series where we had panels of women from our community speak about their career journeys, and we had a coding night for families. We also had a power brunch with influential women in our community, and we even got to attend Michelle Obama's book tour, which was an absolutely incredible and unforgettable experience. And through all the events we planned, I was able to meet and hear from and speak with so many amazing and accomplished women. Like at the Power Brunch, I sat next to a scientist from the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and she was so inspiring and gave me such great advice. And not only that, but Girl Talk taught me how to plan a successful event with all the logistics from top to bottom, which is a skill that I know will help me throughout my life. I also really loved being a mentor and giving advice to the middle school girls in Girl Talk. Overall, Girl Talk has helped shape me into a much more confident and empowered person, and I'm so happy I joined when it was formed. Thank you so much for listening to me speak on behalf of Girl Talk, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And then Annika Shah is also a high school student. She is entering 10th grade in the fall.
Dr. Rogers, Ms. Bavard, and respected members of the Board of Education. My name is Annika Shah, and I'm a rising 10th grader at Syosset High School. And I'm here today, well, virtually, to talk about Girl Talk. Girl Talk is a Syosset School District initiative that introduces young women to female leaders in our community, with the hopes of fostering the skill set necessary for leadership, including business and STEM careers. Being a member of Girl Talk for over 2 years has really boosted my confidence and has given me the courage to try and eventually succeed at public speaking. In the beginning of 8th grade, I was too shy to ask for extra napkins at a restaurant. I always knew there was no reason to be shy and insecure, but I needed the confidence to actualize those feelings. Spending time with like-minded girls and the supportive teachers and mentors I have met through Girl Talk made that process so much easier. After participating and eventually speaking in Girl Talk workshops, such as the Power Brunch and coding event, I felt more empowered to speak my mind. I've even met and now volunteer for a mentor I met at the Power Brunch. I have helped Ms. Jyoti Jaiswal donate PPE to healthcare workers and start up her new initiative, which aids young businesswomen in promoting their products and services. Since I've joined Girl Talk, I've spoken at many events, including the Federal Immigration Induction Ceremony at Sagamore Hill and as class speaker for my middle school graduation. I have qualified for states and nationals in forensics, a speech and debate team at my high school. Of course, I've grown more self-confident and more mature through the transition from middle to high school, but it's no coincidence that I've earned these amazing opportunities after I joined Girl Talk. I think that confidence and public speaking skills are essential qualities for women to take on leadership roles across all fields. My experience is just a sample of what my fellow Girl Talk members have achieved and accomplished. I thank my peers, teachers, and mentors, especially Ms. Burke, at Girl Talk for pushing me to be the best, most confident version of myself. Thank you. Dr. Rogers, Ms.
So the work is going to continue. Even though Ms. Bavard is leaving us, she has many teachers very invested in this. Mr. Matt Piscanero, the business teacher at the high school, and Ms. De Lazan, who were founding members of the committee, and I have been working very hard to make sure that this continues. What have we been doing? The high school course description in the course guidebook has been updated, listing the course careers, including pictures of females in these careers. And we continue to look at it every year to make sure that it is still applicable to what has changed in the world. We are going to leverage Girl Talk as the umbrella for all the clubs in the high school and middle schools that focus on women's leadership and jointly work together to plan district-wide events. And we want to build a strong Syosset pipeline. We've already started the conversation about develop a mentor-mentee program between high school and middle school students, as well as middle school and elementary school students, so they can work with one another and answer questions that they might have and just guide them. And finally, we want to make sure that we can cultivate any alumni as mentors for career and course selections as students graduate and get ready for college. And as we all know, that when we're dealing with diversity, we have to intentionally acknowledge it and make some choices and cultivate diversity. And we have to remember that equity can mean treating some people differently in order to treat them fairly, and honor the capacity of an individual, see the difference, and understand the potential in being different. Ms. Bovard?
So to end this conversation tonight, this picture of the sunflowers is one of my signatures. Sunflowers are a ray of sunshine to me. And this picture depicts that standout, right? We see greatness, right? You need to surround yourself with dreamers, doers, believers, thinkers, but most of all, those who see greatness in you. We see greatness in our girls, and we want them to see that greatness in themselves. So thank you very much for your kind attention this evening.
Del, the work you have done is transformative. I don't know of any district who's working specifically to alter the traditional mindset that certain skills, classes, and careers are better suited for one gender over another. We know that women are underrepresented in occupational fields such as engineering and tech, and that women are underrepresented in business leadership roles. And you understood that students' perceptions of gender roles and the manner in which schools present academic classes and subject matter can either lead to the gender disparity for college majors and careers, or with the right focus, could lead students to believing that they truly belong in the discipline of their choosing. So I'm so proud of this work, and I know that you're leaving these efforts in good hands. I'll certainly be looking forward to following Syosset's efforts in this regard. I also wanted to thank you for being an inspiration to me. I have learned a lot watching you facilitate meetings and events. Your work in moving us to restorative practice is a game changer. And it's a game changer for helping our students. Your role in helping to bring our district's processes into the modern era was arduous, but of tremendous value. Your stamp is on so many of Syosset's accomplishments. So on behalf of the board, we wish you luck in your future endeavors, and we thank your family for sharing you with us.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. It's been my honor to serve Syosset.
And I'd just like to add my thanks and my congratulations and my disappointment at your leaving us with so much work unfinished, Ms. Bavard, and so much left to do. When you and I had a conversation 4 years ago about you joining the team at Syosset, we explored what that would look like. We knew one another as colleagues. You were a superintendent upstate and I was superintendent downstate, and we had met one another through the Superintendent's Association even before that. I knew you had a good reputation, that your colleagues thought highly of you. I thought highly of you. I had no idea what a tremendous leader you were, what a thoughtful partner you could be, and how much you would transform this district in the 4 short years that you've been here. You really have been an incredible leader in the district. You've accomplished so much in a short amount of time. I can't believe you're leaving us. I will say, for those who don't know in the audience, the New York State Association of Women Administrators has gone through a renaissance because of Ms. Bavard coming back as a chair. It was a thriving organization that had lost a little bit of focus and is now really vibrant as a result of that. And I will say that Ms. Bavard is a voracious reader, and she regularly will assign reading to me, which sometimes I like. And you ended with the quote from Seeing the Greatness in You. I knew you were good. I didn't realize how good you were until you joined our team. And I know that I have learned a tremendous amount from having you here. So hopefully you don't change your cell phone number, and I'll still know how to get a hold of you. And I plan on calling frequently. But thank you very much for your service to Syosset.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. It's been an honor to work with you as well. I have learned so much. Same. It's mutual.
Okay, and with that, is Dr. Rufo ready for her treasurer's report?
She should be. Dr. Rufo?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As indicated in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end June 30th, 2020 was $93,821,035.04. It also shows that balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we will begin audience to the public, and I ask you to state your name and your address clearly when you reach the podium. so that we can hear you and know who's speaking to us. I ask that you take 4 minutes to either ask your questions or make your statements, and then take your seat for the next person who has questions, and then we will do our best to answer all of the questions that we've received after audience to the public has closed. So with that, please come up if you'd like to ask a question.
Hi, my name is Teresa Morali, and my address is 27 Lincrest Street, Syosset, New York. Can you hear me? I'm a little short, so you might have to move it down a little bit. So I have several questions, and I'm hoping I could just ask them all in 4 minutes. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you very much to the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, and all the trustees and president, vice president for your hard work during this time period, this unprecedented time period in our country and our world's history. But so one question is, in light of recent national events, is the district adding racially based social injustice issues / civics education for the curriculum for K through 12? And if so, will it include concepts such as recognizing one's race-based or what's called white privilege? If emergent social issues, social justice issues are to be included in the curriculum, will the children also be made aware of the current international and domestic crisis in which rings of pedophiles are sexually exploiting and victimizing women and children specifically, especially children, regardless of their race? I'd also like to know, is the daily COVID questionnaire, which includes sensitive PHI, personal health information, going to be transmitted through an unsecured, unencrypted Google form, as it will include children's full name and health data, such as temperature readings and more? Another question is, I know that you sent out the material safety data sheets on the FAQ, which I appreciate, for the chemicals that are going to be used in the school. The material safety data sheets are required by OSHA, I'm assuming, and that's for staff safety. What about children's safety? How can we be assured that kids won't be exposed to neurotoxins on a daily with multiple times a day? Can we opt them out of hand sanitizer upon entry to school or at other times if we prefer hand washing for them as parents? Another question is, when a child is isolated for suspected COVID with the mentioned symptoms, what will be said to that child? Will an adult be present with the child? And what will happen if the child, say, for example, a 4, 5, or 6-year-old who doesn't understand tries to leave the isolation room? Will they be locked in? What about an older child who is frightened and wants to leave the isolation room? And I have this as well I'd like to ask. The New York guidelines, state guidelines state, and I quote, to maintain the safety of students and staff, school districts should plan and include physical social distancing up to 6 feet. You're talking about the redundancy of the mask and the social distancing. Understandably, students wearing masks in the hallways, transferring between classes and or upon leaving and coming to school should be implemented with the mask. The mask should be implemented. However, why, if it's not New York State guideline, why do we have to do this redundancy with the children learning instruction in the room? I want to know, for solidarity's sake, in the spirit of solidarity, are the superintendent, deputy superintendent, everybody working in offices doing their work at their desks, are they also going to stay masked up with only 10-minute breaks throughout the day and to eat, just as the students are going to be required? And lastly, would the district be willing to sign a document stating that they assume all liability should a child endure physical or mental damage from wearing these masks all day, knowing that there is no peer-reviewed journal article that proves that mask wearing for 7 to 8 hours a day does not cause physical or mental damage to children. So would you be willing to, if they are going to be adhering to this, are you willing to sign something as a district saying you don't believe that it could cause any harm, physical or mental, to children who need to be forced to be wearing masks all day? That's all. Thank you. Do I stay here? Or do I stay? Just one related thing. Is the district aware of the 2 instances in China where 2 teens died from cardiac arrest in separate instances? Otherwise healthy children, both wearing N95 masks?
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to ask a question or make a statement for the board? Please.
Hi, my name is Lauren Friedman. I live at 14 Warren Drive in Syosset, New York. I have a very different perspective on the mask wearing. I'm actually concerned that it is not going to be adhered to properly. I'm actually looking around the room oh, sure. Thank you. I'm actually seeing people not wearing them properly in this room, and these are adults who should know how to wear a mask at this point, and I would like to know who's going to enforce proper mask wearing for the children. I also just want to clarify, in the FAQ that was sent out, said that the district is going to try and follow 2 out of 3 social distancing techniques that could either be a barrier, being 6 feet apart, or wearing a mask. I just want to make sure that the mask is an absolute and not an option. My other question is about opting in and out of virtual learning. I understand that it's been said that you can opt out of in-person learning at any time, but you cannot opt into in-person learning at any time. Just for the sake of working parents and people who are trying to coordinate schedules, I have an elementary school child and a middle school child. So if I were to opt out actually and wish to place a request to opt in, I would have to have my elementary school student home for an additional month because they operate on a trimester system. Is there any thought being given to a district-wide date as opposed to a trimester and a semester date? And my third question is, if a child misses a day or 2 from in-school learning because they don't feel well or they're sick, is there a way to log on virtually so that they could still be caught up when they go back to school? Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Hi, Alona Cohen, 6 Valley Road, Syosset. I had a couple of questions, but I do first want to thank Ms. Bavard for all of the amazing work that she's done, both on the topic of gender equity, but just in general around instruction and support for the kids and, quite frankly, for the parents as well in this process. It's very much appreciated. One of my questions is around language instruction in the middle school. And is that going to be something that the students stay in the classroom for, or is that one of the things that they're switching since they do have, they do take different languages? And then probably the bigger question I have is what's being put in place with regards to curriculum design to ensure that students are being assessed and graded relative to content skills rather than the skills associated with successfully doing virtual or hybrid learning. so that the things that the things that the students tend to not be great at, or I can definitely say my kids are not great at, the sort of executive functioning skills of managing your time and organization, especially in the absence of things like bells and periods and other people, so that those don't get in the way of their learning. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for our audience to the public? Going once? Twice? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. What are some of the disciplinary actions that are floating around or have been decided for children who break the social distancing or mask wearing protocols? For example, if a child forgets and hugs somebody or wants to play with another child at recess and they play tag or something like that, is it like a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing, or what are some of the rules that are going to be implemented as far as discipline?
Thank you. And that closes audience to the public. Dr. Rogers?
Thanks, everybody. I'll do my best to try and address as many of these as possible. Ms. Morelli, I'll take both of yours together since 2 different parts, and I'll go in reverse order. So on the board's agenda for this evening are some amendments to the code of conduct and to the dress code. So masks will be made part of the dress code. The dress code is part of the code of conduct. And our hope is that compliance will not be something that needs to be won through a series of rewards and punishment, but rather an understanding that these are practices that we're putting in place because they make everyone safer. And certainly younger children will likely need some instruction. The state guidance requires us to do instruction for students on the proper use and protective equipment, etc. So we're already going to do training for students. Hopefully we'll be able to reinforce those lessons for them. And I'm sure that as the year goes on, they'll become better at it. But I don't think that teachers or principals will see 2 children second graders who accidentally hug each other after not having seen one another for 6 months, and they'll see that as a disciplinary infraction. I think they'll see that as an opportunity for them to have a learning moment. And I would distinguish that from someone who is willfully disobeying a request from a teacher. And that would have a consequence under any circumstances, regardless of what the request was from the teacher. In terms of the changes to curriculum, we have asked at the high school and middle school for social studies, English, to do a little bit of curriculum writing this summer around more diverse authors, more historical events that have to do with events in history, our own diversity as a community, the diversity of the country. In terms of the second half of that question, we do teach students about internet safety in our health classes and elsewhere. So obviously, kids need to be aware that when they're online, there are things to protect themselves from. The COVID questionnaire is hosted by one of the BOCES. All school districts, all BOCES are required to comply with something called Education Law 2D that has to do with how information is kept encrypted, both in transit and at rest. But we are not going to be in the questionnaire collecting any actual health data. The questionnaire just asks someone to affirm that they haven't had any of the high risk activities. It does not record temperature or any health data. And in fact, when we're taking temperatures at the front of the school, we're not allowed to record the actual temperature. That would be health data. We're only able to record fail or pass. And fail and pass is not protected by HIPAA, but an actual reading of 100.6 would be protected by HIPAA. The material data sheets are available, but all of the materials that we use are approved by the State Education Department, and the State Education Department's guidelines are for green and healthy schools. I think this is in the last PowerPoint presentation to the board, which is posted online. And it's not a question of, is OSHA only worried about adults? The State Education Department constrains all of the things that we can use, whether it's for fertilizing or for pesticides or anything else. Everything is controlled by the State Education Department. Why are we looking to have redundant measures? The barriers are the least effective, at least as far as what we've been reading. Masks are the most effective. Social distancing is also effective. So obviously people have to eat, and you can't eat with a mask on. So to get some redundancy, having the physical barrier makes it possible to eat and still have a second safety measure in place. But having the mask and the distance simultaneously is the safest thing that we can do. And as I said earlier in the presentation, our goal is to try and minimize risk wherever we can. And so if there's an opportunity to minimize risk and we don't take it, then what we've done is we've left more risk on the table than is absolutely necessary. And we also said that, we'll evaluate this on a rolling basis. We're going to learn more over time, but our initial posture is going to be as conservative as possible because we're talking about the safety of children and adults. If someone is isolated for COVID, obviously we're going to want to, I shouldn't say isolated for COVID. If someone's isolated because they're running a fever, we're going to try and be as discreet as possible, but the state guidance requires us to have them in an isolation place. So obviously our teachers, our building principals, our nurses are spectacular at talking to students, doing it in a way that's discreet and that is not stigmatizing. If they're not compliant with remaining in a room, feverish kids tend, in my experience, not to want to go running around, but some may. But generally, students are compliant when you say, you need to wait in this room for your mom to be here. Will they be with an adult? Yes, they will be with an adult. That adult will be wearing upgraded PPE as a safety measure to protect the adult's safety while they're in the room with the child. But the child will not be left alone in a room. I don't know of any school district that isn't requiring some kind of a mask policy. We work in conjunction. Obviously, we work in conjunction with a number of different entities whose job it is to help us. There's the New York State Center for School Health. We have our own school physician. There is the Health and Safety Coordinator for Nassau BOCES who works with all 56 districts in the county. He is part of a network of health and safety coordinators that work at the 37 BOCES that cover all of the school districts in the state except for a handful of large city school districts. And we're trying to follow the best practices that are coming out of all of these different entities who specialize in this and who give us the advice to follow. I'm not aware of the incident that you referenced in China, but I'll certainly spend some time researching it later this week. Next set of questions. Who will enforce mask wearing? Obviously, it's going to be, as I mentioned earlier, part of the code of conduct. Typically, teachers, building principals will enforce the code of conduct. If there's a repeated violation or willful disregard for direction from an adult, that would be dealt with just like we deal with other willful disregard of directions from adults. So in the FAQ, what's best, what's safest is 6 feet and a mask, and then this on top of that. But again, there have to be times when students are able to eat. If students are eating at their desk, we'll have 2 out of the 3 in place. But the more time that we can protect people, the better off we're going to be. Opting in and out of virtual learning. So the challenge with this is that the facilities are going to be so tight. So opting into the virtual space is going to be easier than opting into a classroom where every seat is already taken. So by structuring this so that we do it at semester breaks, not semester breaks, trimester breaks, or marking period breaks, we're trying to find natural breaks in the curriculum where we would, and I don't pretend that this is going to be easy. I think this is going to be really challenging to integrate kids into the buildings if the classes are as full as they can possibly be already. So whether it's on the bus or it's in the classroom, there are not going to be a lot of empty seats waiting for somebody to take advantage of them. So knowing how hard that's going to be, there's no way we could do it on a rolling basis for the 40 weeks of the school year. So we just have to pick a couple of points at a time and say, all right, this is going to be a really hard thing, and this is when we're going to do that hard thing. And there's going to be just limitation. Whoever Ms. Bavard's successor is, well, at least in the short term, it's going to be Mr. Cardillo. But breaking the work up so that we don't have all the secondary schools and all the elementary schools doing this reintegration simultaneously. Just, I'm worried about the bandwidth of administrators to be able to work on this problem. It's going to be very challenging. And so I totally take the point about how complicated it might be for a family. And I certainly understand that. And if there was a way that we could do it, it makes a lot of sense to do. I'm just concerned that it's beyond our capacity to accommodate that. Then if a child misses a day or two sick, how will they get instruction at the high school? It's going to be easier because there's already going to be a virtual environment. At the elementary schools, it will probably look more like what's happening now when a student is sick, because we're not setting up those classrooms to be streaming classrooms, and the teachers are planning instruction around being live with students. They're not planning instruction around streaming, whereas at the high school, they will be planning instruction around streaming. And the lesson design for the streaming environment is different from the lesson design in the live environment. Language instruction in the middle school. I'm going to punt this one to Ms. Bavard. Obviously, the challenge with the middle school day has been going from a 9-period day to an 8-period day. The same number of hours, it's the same number of minutes. We're going to try and get the same content. It's going to be rearranged a little bit differently because of the 8-period day. But the middle school, again, has been a huge challenge. But from our survey data, parents wanted students in every day at middle school if it was at all possible. It is possible. It requires some compromises, and there are going to be parts of the curriculum that are not going to be as great as they were before this. But we do have a plan. So Ms. Bavard.
So you want me to address the world language?
Yes, world language in middle
Yeah.
school, please.
So we've had world language we've had students switching, we've had students staying. Most likely students will switch for world language. It is complicated though, because they choose their languages. So we will honor that. The middle school principals were texting me this evening because we've been in discussion about it. And the answer tonight is most likely they will switch for world language.
They will what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
They will switch for world language.
Okay.
And then lastly, your point about how do we measure students' acquisition of the curriculum versus students' facility with virtual learning tools. I think it's a good point. We learned a lot this spring. Obviously, we ramped up through 3 phases of changes as we got a little bit better at the online environment. As I said a little while ago, I think the fall is going to be a bumpy start because it's so new and so different, and it's going to be even different from what we were doing in the spring. I also have an incredible amount of confidence in our teachers to be able to parse that difference and not make it about, how good somebody is with the technology, but really whether they're acquiring the curriculum. We have been having a lot of conversations about what assessment will look like in the virtual world or the semi-virtual world. When do you take tests? What do those tests look like? How do you know that it's your own original work and not something that was compromised in some way? Those conversations are ongoing with the building principals, but we're planning for the reopened environment, but we are also simultaneously planning for and hoping against going into the all virtual environment again, like we did last spring. And so we realize we have to build both things at the same time. And so a lot of that conversation around assessment is part of this other discussion of what we're going to do if we have to return to the virtual full-time for everybody. But it's very much on our radar screen. I think I got everything.
You did. That was miraculous. So thank you for doing such a good job. A lot of questions, a lot of great points were made. And so thank you so much for all of your feedback and your opinions. Okay, so there are no discussion items, but we have discussed a lot tonight. And in unfinished business, we have the continued use of Native American team name and mascot. And the reason that's placed in unfinished business as opposed to discussion item is because the board had developed a process by which if a topic is made for the second time, it wouldn't be made as a discussion item. It would be broached as a motion. And the intent of that was to alleviate bringing the same topics up for discussion over and over again. So since I had raised the topic the last month, the motion would be stated to discontinue the use of Braves moniker and Indian head mascot and create a process for community involvement in deciding on a new name and mascot. Do I have a first? Rob Gershon. Do I have a second to Susan Falcove? And are there any questions? Mr. DiFilippo.
Well, where, can you hear me? Is it
Yes.
much better? Okay.
It is, thank you.
So, whereas we had a discussion, I believe, last month, the item is still under discussions. I think there should be a discussion. I quite honestly don't even know why we're discussing it, because I haven't seen any opposition from the community demanding that we address this. So I'm a little confused why, with everything on our plate, with all these questions the parents have, all the safety issues, all the mechanics of worrying and knowing how things are going to work, why we're talking about this right now.
To answer that question, student safety and how inclusive they feel in a school environment is our job 365 days out of the year. So it's going to be pertinent at every meeting. But this particular topic was also This particular topic was also very timely because we've all, I think, over the last few months have been revisiting how we think about inclusivity and how we are teaching, for instance, social injustice, and how we are making our students of color feel safe in the community. All of these things, all of these topics are related to a mascot issue that's been going on since the 1970s. But in terms of present day, we see it publicly with sports teams deciding to change their names and their mascots as well. And so in terms of the timeliness issue, I think it's very timely, it's very topical, and I think it's really important. As to your point about nobody raising opposition, opposition has been raised by our student community over the course of many years. And at the last board meeting, I mentioned that in the year 2000, the school board actually decided to change the name and the mascot. And then for whatever reason, They just didn't go through with their decision. And additionally, we recently received a petition of 200 or so students who expressed their wishes that the name and the mascot be changed. And they expressed their pain at having to be in a school that's appropriating a minority's ethnicity as their name and mascot. So in addition to the petition, we've received opinions from community members in writing and not in writing of all different beliefs and opinions with respect to this issue. We certainly have had people who have opposed it for the reasons that I had stated last month. And we've had people write in that they would like us to keep the moniker and the mascot because of tradition, because it makes them feel good, because they feel that bravery and Indian warriors are something to be celebrated. And so we have at this point heard the gamut of the opinions that have been given. But what strikes me is that it is divisive. And there's no question that we have a community of people who feel very strongly in both ways. And because of that, we have a mascot and a name that's divisive. And so the name and the mascot are not serving our community. A mascot and a name, the whole point is to bring community together and for it to please everyone, to make them feel good, to make everyone feel like they're part of something. And I certainly think that there are names and mascots that we can use where everybody can rally around and not be offended. But right now, as it stands, we don't have that. And so that's why it's being made now. Are there any other questions? Rob Gershon?
Okay. Yeah, I agree with what Tracy just said. And I think it's a particularly good time for us to be discussing this issue and seeing whether or not this is the appropriate time to discontinue use of our mascot. Social science research indicates that sports mascots and images, rather than being mere entertainment, are important symbols with deeper psychological and social effects. The use of Native American names and symbols are a form of ethnic stereotyping that promotes misunderstanding and prejudice, contributing to other problems faced by Native Americans. All stereotypes are harmful because they promote false or misleading associations between a group and an attribute, and this fosters disrespectful relationships. I don't think that it is right to continue use of the name Braves and the symbols of an Indian head in the year 2020. For people who say, well, that's the way it's always been, Syosset is the Braves, we're associated with the Braves. I understand what they're saying, but times have changed. And I think that this is the moment to do the right thing and to discontinue use of those symbols and stop using the name of a group of people as our mascot. I think it's awful. I don't think to say that, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, we shouldn't be focusing on this. It doesn't take a lot of time to, as a group, come here and say, you know what? We don't want to set that kind of example for our students, for our young children who are growing up in this community. We try to teach them values, how to treat people with respect. And I don't see how we reconcile having the Braves mascot with teaching our children the right way to treat other people. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Chris Ulrich?
So I know this was introduced a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. It wasn't an issue for the last 20 years. And certain board members made an issue of it. We've received a lot of correspondence, support and against. A lot of what we received against is from outside the community. It's from people who don't attend the schools, don't live here. There was something published from one of the other districts calling out these people because these same people are sending the same messages to all the districts trying to push an agenda. Now, I'm not saying it should be the Braves, shouldn't be the Braves, but we've got much bigger issues to deal with. We have education, we have safety, we have health. And right now, we didn't have anybody in the district concerned with this until the board introduced it a few months ago. And individually, it may be a sore point, maybe a political concern, I don't know. But it's not the thing our district needs to focus on right now. I've seen petitions also. I've seen petitions where nobody's actually signed it. It's a list of names. And I've known the names on it and reached out to people and said, oh, if you have a question about this, why didn't you call me? And they said, what petition? I didn't put my name on a petition, but somebody put their name on it. So we've got people outside our community. We have people ending up on digital petitions, which are just a list of names, but they didn't add themselves to it. And again, we're pressing this as if it's, the end of the world. There is tremendous controversy about this. Obviously, a couple of board members planned on bringing it up tonight and I guess had some data ready. It would have been nice if the rest of us knew it was going to be an issue, or it should have been put on the agenda if we wanted to have an informed discussion instead of, sort of being caught off guard by it. So at this point, no, I don't support going forward, making any change. Let's focus on the kids, getting them back to school safely, their health, their education, all the challenges we're going to face. And we don't need to start up another issue right now.
Rob?
Dr. Rogers, I don't know if I'm mistaken. I thought that this was on the agenda, and I believe that last month it was on the agenda, and we said that we were going to continue discussing it this month. I don't think that this came as a surprise to, certainly not to me. Was this made clear? Was this sent out to the board members in advance?
It is item 11 on the agenda. It's under unfinished business. It's right after discussion items.
Thank you. And just to remark, this isn't a couple of board members who decided to make this an issue, but this was actually raised after we had a series of social injustices in the country, and students raised it as one of their issues when it came to curriculum and how our school, how they'd like to see our school make changes. So in addition to the fact that students have been raising this issue over the years, not 20 years ago, but several years ago and today, this is an issue that is also quite topical, again, because it's being raised out in the country. So, Andy?
I just want to clarify a couple things. Tracy, you said, so now it's unfinished business. So now there's going to be a motion to vote on this right now?
Yeah, unless somebody asks to table it.
Okay. I have a couple thoughts about this, and I read some of the same research that Rob had mentioned. And again, I mentioned this last month. On the one hand, our mission statement and under community is community that celebrates and supports its rich multicultural makeup. So one could look at that and say, well, we're being hypocritical having a name the Braves, and that is could be one opinion. And I'm getting back to some of this, the research that I also read. They state that when found in U.S. Commission on Civil Rights states when found in educational institutions, mascots may also create a hostile environment inconsistent with learning to respect diverse cultures, but instead teach that stereotypes that misrepresent a minority group are permissible. I'm not sure all of our students think that. I know that some students wrote in. You said a couple hundred, right? So I don't know. I'm not saying they are or they're not, but I also read, and then Rob, mentioned this also, about the effect on Native Americans of these names, and that stereotyping affects academic performance, self-esteem, which contribute to all the other issues faced by Native Americans, including suicide, unemployment, and poverty. Yet the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights called for an end to the use of Native American mascots for non-Native schools. So a school that has a large amount of Native American students can use these names. So one of the examples is University of North Carolina, Pembroke. Their nickname is the Braves, but the mascot is a red-tailed hawk. So it seems to me just to be a little incongruous that there's studies, social science, saying that this has a definite negative effect on Native Americans, and it might. And then it's okay for schools that have Native American students to use those names. I don't know, that's just the way I was looking at that. I'd like to get the impact of the community on this.
Absolutely.
A little further from here than because I'm not really ready to vote on this right now.
So are you requesting a table it?
I am.
Okay. But what I'd say, then, yeah. Okay. Is there a motion to, is there a first to, that's a motion, Angie, right? You're gonna make that a
Yes.
motion? Okay, is there a first for that motion? The table?
To table it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Anna, and is there a second? Chris? Okay. Now, so we'll just take Anna as the second. We didn't need It's okay. Nope, now we can speak on that too. So with respect to tabling it, again, that would be discussing it for the next month as well. At this point, we do know that the community is divided on this issue. We do know that there are people in the community who wish for us to keep the Braves name and mascot. And we do know that there are people in the community that don't want it. So I'm not sure whether we're sending a right message by opening it up to get what? Is it a tally that we're looking for?
No.
Is it a, if it's 51% and it's not
No.
offensive, but if it's 50% it is, what is the involvement that we're looking for?
I wasn't talking about like a poll because we're elected by the community to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe that we should ask the community to vote on every time we have to make a decision. Is what they need us for. So I just would like more community feedback and more student feedback on this issue, more than the people, the relatively small amount of residents that wrote in. And it was both ways. It was both.
Yeah.
It was for both, getting rid of the name and keeping the name. So I just thought that was a relatively small sample. That's all. I'd like to, in whatever shape or form it is, I'd like to get a little more feedback from the community. I don't think it should be a poll, but like we had community involvement for all the safety initiatives. We had people, we had community, we had groups come in and voice their opinion and ask people their opinions on those things. Something similar like that. I was still thinking of.
Chris?
Yeah, I think we should, next month's too early. I think we need to wait until really the pandemic is over, because we need to get back, someday we'll get back to normal where people will attend in the auditorium and they'll come up. There wasn't one person tonight that felt from this audience, it's a little larger than last time, thank you for coming, but didn't raise that question because they had more pressing questions for their children and their concern. So I'm not saying it's not important. Can we vote on it tonight? We could have voted on it tonight and it could have won or lost, but you know, I don't think things of this importance with a lot of heritage should just be decided if they get 5 votes, you know? I think, and that's going to be another conversation I'd like to bring up with things where we need to have a supermajority, which means we need 6 votes to get some important matters like this done or more. Okay. So you could bring it up next month, but maybe someone may table it again. Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, we're not going to continually table this from month to month. There's going to be a vote and there's going to be a roll call on those votes, and people are going to have to make a decision what they want to do. We are the elected representatives of this school district, and as such, we make these decisions. As Ms. Frankel stated before, this board already decided many years ago to discontinue the use of that mascot and that name. I don't know what happened thereafter, but none of us were on the board at that time. But it's not going to get pushed aside from month to month and swept under the rug. And there's no such thing as a supermajority. We vote, and the majority of this board is the decision. I'm calling for a vote tonight. And if there's any other board members who want to speak on this topic, let's hear from you now.
I can't vote on that. Okay. First, is there any other board member that wanted to address the motion, either motion?
Hi.
Okay, Susan.
Am I, Tracy, am I
We
called?
can hear you.
Okay. So it's a really hard topic, and I know it's a really difficult time, and to be discussing this. And I understand, and I really respect the tradition and the history behind the mascot and the name and all the reasons why people feel strongly that they want to keep the mascot in the name. However, for me, because there is such a large portion of our community, even though it's divided, there is still such a large portion of our community, and especially of our students and parents and faculty, that are offended and upset by the name. And it's created such a huge divide in our community at a time when we need unity, and we don't want to have people in our community that are feeling not included. And it's such a huge percentage of people that feel left out and marginalized and hurt by something that's supposed to bring the community together and to make everyone feel included and welcomed. And a mascot and a name is something that brings pride and positive feelings for the whole community, not just some of the people in the community. And for me, for there to be so many students, especially, that feel left out and not represented and hurt by our mascot and our name, for me, it's important that those students and those community members feel that they're heard, and that we celebrate diversity, and that we celebrate inclusion, and that we don't want a large portion of our community to feel left out and not seen and not heard, and that their feelings don't count and don't matter to us. I want everybody in our community to feel heard and to feel included and to feel like their feelings count. So for me, I think it's important to change the mascot and the name so that we send a message that everybody in Syosset counts, not just some.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the topic? And then the way Robert's rules go, Tom, did you have something to add before I? Okay. Hold it for a few minutes. Oh, no, you don't have the same.
Obviously, we have a diverse district and we want to be all inclusive. That's in our creed. And to answer the students' requests, I think if we really want to address equality and everybody being inclusive, I think we should have not just checking off a box that we changed something and then nothing else changed after that. I think we should have an all-inclusive. We should have a complete program of how we're going to change diversity, how everybody feels all included. Just by changing the mascot name is not going to make any difference. So we need to have a full comprehensive program that should be presented so everybody feels included. That's what we need to do. By focusing on one thing is not going to change the diversity problem. Thank you.
Okay, so we follow Robert's rules of order here, and we have two motions, and the way this works is we vote to on Andy's motion first to table it, and
You
if
wanna
that
withdraw your motion?
fails, then we move on
Withdraw your
to.
motion?
We voting now?
So we're going to vote to on whether to table the motion or not, and if we table it, we're tabling it for a month.
Or Andy, do you want to withdraw it?
So if so we're just going to bring it up next month.
Right.
We don't have time to. We don't have time to
So the
get
community would
feedback.
have then another month. They've had now two. So the community would have another month to share their opinions with the schools.
And would we be going to inquire about that, or are we just going to wait? Are we just going to wait for people to email us, or how would that work?
I mean, that would not be my recommendation to post, to the community. That to me sounds like a poll on an issue that is
Yeah, I don't know.
very sensitive.
Yeah, it's a very polarizing issue, obviously. I don't know if that's saying it's a poll. I mean, we asked for community involvement on the safety initiative, and we had all these focus groups come in. So I don't think that was seen as a poll, was it? That I'm using it as an example.
So would you like your motion to be to table the discussion and to do some sort of board outreach?
I would prefer that. I don't
Okay.
know what anyone else thinks.
So the motion, so that's the motion you would like me to?
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay, so Andy's motion would read to table the discussion for another month and have the board do outreach to the community on the issue of changing the Braves name and moniker. Anna, now that the language has changed, you have the right to either withdraw your second or assent to the change in the language.
Yes, I guess withdraw then.
Okay.
If we're
Is
gonna.
there a second for Andy's motion? Okay, so then we move on to the vote. Okay, the motion fails for lack of a second, and now we have Rob's motion for a roll call vote, but it's really my motion that will be roll call. So the motion will read to discontinue the use of the Braves moniker and Indian head mascot and create a process for community involvement in deciding on a new name and mascot. Chris Ulrich?
I vote no for changing the mascot. No. The
Anna?
name.
No.
Andy?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Tracy? Yes. Christopher Lippo?
No.
Tom Rotolo? Carol Chang?
No.
Susan Falco?
Yes.
Okay, the vote fails. Thank you for that discussion. The following items are new business. A1 is the approval of staff changes for certified staff. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstention? A2 is the appointment of Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology, Dr. Teresa Curry. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Dr. Curry, we wish you lots of luck, and we just want to congratulate you and thank you for all the work you've done in the past and the great work we know you'll do moving forward. A3 is the approval of unaligned staff employment agreements. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A4 is the appointment of the terms of the co-pilot teacher agreement. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Mr. DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A5 is the approval of coaching recommendations for fall 2020. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? Yes, Tom?
What we did in the spring was the coaches still held workouts and had activities for the students. Right now, the fall schedule is supposed to begin on September 21. I was just speaking with Mr. Cardillo, who's in touch with Pat Pizzarelli, who is the head of Section 8. And they're in discussions right now with the State Association about whether preseason practices can begin. So if preseason practices begin, obviously our coaches are going to start working with students. If the preseason practices don't begin, then you'll see there's an asterisk that says this starts when the season starts. So the fall season would actually be moved into the spring timeframe between the winter and regular spring seasons. That's when the stipend would start. But the expectation would, all of those seasons will be cut short, but what we anticipate is that they'll be doing preseason work with the students in any event. So it's the stipend is for the season's worth of work.
Do we know when, Dr. Rogers, do we know when, what date the decision will be made about the fall season by?
I don't know when it will be made. I know that when the governor had his press conference on August 7th, where he announced that schools will be reopening, during the question and answer session with members of the media, this question was raised, and he said something to the effect of, no decisions have been made yet. So I don't have, that's as fresh as Friday, but I don't have any more detail about when the decision might be made.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions on A5? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A6 is the approval of 2020-2021 stipends and hourly rates for certified staff. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A7 is the appointment of a certified athletic trainer. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A8 is the settlement agreement for a non-instruction staff member. May I have a motion, please? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B1 is the recommendation of the Committee on Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B2 is the recommendation of the Committees on Preschool Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B3 is the appointment to the Building Subcommittee on Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B4 is the appointment to the Out-of-District Subcommittee on Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B5 is the approval of a settlement agreement and release. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B6 is the first reading of the following policies: equal opportunity, prohibition against sexual harassment, class size, child abuse in an educational setting, privacy and security for student, teacher, and principal data, information security breach and notification. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? Okay, the policies will be voted on at the September 14th, 2020 meeting. Copies of the proposed policies are available for inspection on the district website. B7 is the approval of policy 5300, Code of Conduct. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Oh, Chris, do you have a question?
So, what if a student is working virtually and, no cause of their own, either the technology fails or the internet fails, and they can't proceed, much like the storm we just had, people were out of power, they didn't have internet for a few days. So will a student report that, or can we probably need some type of process to report that so the student doesn't get penalized?
Yeah, just as when a student is absent from a regular class, there's a note or an excuse or something like that. If the student has, for some reason, inability to participate in the virtual class, they would just inform the teacher of what went on, and it would be excused like other absences.
Are there any other questions? None?
Yeah, as long as they're participating in instruction and whatever instruction that we give them, they'll be marked as attending. It may be different at elementary and secondary, but elementary attendance from a state reporting perspective is not as important as high school attendance, where you have to be given credit for instruction in order to earn Carnegie credits towards a transcript.
Are there any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B8 is the acceptance of the district-wide school safety plan and building level emergency response plan. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? Yes. Oh, Anna.
Okay, now it's on. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, very well.
All right. So on number 8, we were talking about 504 for any medical reasons, correct? So now, is that going to apply to all the bullet points in number 8? You know, in other words, what happens if a student who didn't go through the process of 504 halfway through the lesson can't breathe? Is that going to look like Mrs. So-and-so, I can't breathe, or we're going to wait for them to faint? Or how does this actually going to work if, you know, the 504 wasn't obtained? And how long does that take? And how will the teacher deal with a student in distress during instruction?
So if a student feels unwell during class, leave aside the pandemic and the face covering. If a student started to feel faint, or if they were flushed or something like that, you would inform the teacher and say,
Mhm.
I don't feel good, I need to go to the nurse. Same thing would apply here. If for some reason during instruction a student was uncomfortable and needed to go see the nurse, they would just say to the teacher, I need to do something different. If it's a young student, the teacher would have them escorted to the nurse, same as they would for any other reason to go to the nurse. The 504 process is designed to identify what the medical need is and then build a response based on that medical need. So the 504 may be different for different kinds of students based on what their underlying medical condition is. But a 504 is something where there's a diagnosed medical condition, that condition is understood, the impact of that condition is recognized, and our school physician works with, if necessary, our PPS staff, our pupil personnel services staff, to design what the accommodation is for the child. So if there's an incident, you know, that where a student is feeling unwell or uncomfortable, obviously they need to flag that. In terms of the bullets that are here, the language that is here is taken directly from the state guidance. So this is not a language that we invented ourselves, as we often do in our own regulations and policies. We take language that's in a state document and then we repeat it in our own policies. So that's where those bullets come from. Obviously, bullet 2 and 3, anyone who has trouble breathing or is unconscious, we're not
Can you hear anything?
Can't hear anything now.
No, me neither.
I know, I'm trying to, I think we lost the video feed.
They said there's a power outage.
Oh, no.
They said,
Yeah, there was a flash of light or something. Yeah,
Like a power surge.
yeah, a power outage actually.
Oh, an outage.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's power outage, and they say it's coming back on.
Seems to be the trend.
Well, you know, people who live on Colony, they got their power back finally yesterday, and they lost it again today.
Oh,
So
my
I don't know if
goodness.
it's got to do with that.
Yeah. That's got to be really frustrating.
It is frustrating, and I'm getting text messages from the community asking what happened. Okay, they are restarting Zoom again now.
Ms. Chang, you're now telling the community?
No, no.
You are, yeah.
Well, that worked.
Thank you, though. You just let everybody know what was going on. So they're waiting for the Wi-Fi to come back again with the power surge and recycle.
I'm not on mute.
I just got a text, Wi-Fi, everything. Is it back? Oh.
I don't think so. Still no Wi-Fi. Oh, here we go. Here comes Mr. Tom.
This is like a baseball game with a rain delay. And is the rain going to stop so the game could go on?
Yeah.
The fans are anxious to know.
Let me just inform you.
Okay.
So the answer to your question, are we pursuing it? Yes. We have a grant writer that the board asked us to employ a number of meetings ago. And that grant writer is working with our director of operations, Greg Hamilton, to identify all of our COVID expenditures. Dr. Rufo has created a a COVID code in our financial management system. So any purchase that is made that is because of this emergency is in that COVID code line. So it'll be easy for us to run those numbers as they come through. What we're looking at right now is what, under the order, what expenses are eligible for reimbursement, and then we'll compile them, and instead of just filing small expenditures as we go along, we'll file a larger expenditure, and we'll do it in chunks.
Right. I would think that in addition to the items that I mentioned, that your staff all the time should also reimburse by at least 75%. I know Governor Cuomo had requested at 100%, but I haven't been able to find anything on the internet that validates that request.
Yeah, I'm not aware that the governor has increased the FEMA reimbursement yet, but obviously we'll be attentive to it and we'll try to maximize any recovery that we can get.
Thank you.
Yes.
For those board members who joined us on Zoom, we are taking questions on item C3. Are there any other questions? Yes, Andy.
So obviously we have to do this. Most important thing is keeping our students and staff and safe. And we've already obviously spent a lot of money on doing this, and we're going to spend more. But is there any provision for if it keeps escalating as far as the costs? Where is it we take out of reserves, or how does that work?
Yeah, we've started having that conversation as well. Obviously, thank you. There are two considerations. One is on the revenue side of the budget. The other is on the expenditure side of the budget. So the revenues are the monies that we use to pay for our expenditures. The budget that is voter approved is an expenditure budget. So we have revenues that are raised through taxes. We have revenues that come to us through state aid, and we have our reserves that can be used as revenues for us to a point. But we can't exceed the voter authorization of total expenditures in the budget. So we're actually in conversations right now with the attorney about what if there are necessary expenses. They're called ordinary contingent expenses in school law parlance that are necessary for us to address this emergency. How do we fund those? And that conversation's ongoing right now.
Are there any other questions on C3? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C4 is the authorization to establish school and public library tax levies. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Chris DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? T5 is the authorization for an agreement for Nassau BOCES project. May I have a motion, please? Samartolo. Seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C6 is the authorization for a Nassau BOCES project. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C7 is the authorization for a contract with Nassau BOCES for services. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C8 is the appointment of individuals to serve as volunteer judges for forensic events. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Mr. DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C9 are the authorizations for change orders for the high school. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Ulrich, seconded by Mr. Gershon. Are there any questions? Chris DiFilippo.
Dr. Rogers, on this item, the way I read it, it's the second paragraph, change order C1 in the amount of 36,000 for the following general contingency allowance and the reduction of 25,000 and allowance for labor and dumpster in the reduction of 36,000. Shouldn't those two be added together to come up with 61,000 and not 36,000?
I'm going to ask Dr. Rufo to answer this question. She's the one that works on these change orders with Mr.
Okay.
Hamilton. Dr. Rufo, are you able to hear us?
I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that, please?
I'd be happy to. Mr. DiFilippo is asking in the second paragraph of item C9, the deduct change orders. He's asking whether the $36,000 deduct change order and the $25,000 deduct change order should be added together and therefore be a $61,000 deduct change order.
No, I don't. I believe that's a $36,000 in total change order. Hold on, I'm looking for the. Hold on, one moment. The 25,000, an amount of 36,000 for the following general contingency of 25, an allowance for labor and dumpster. That should have been 11,000 for a total of 30. It should be 25 and 11 for 36. So the total amount in paragraph 3 is correct at 36. That reduction should be 11. So we'll have to make that correction in the second column. Second paragraph, last number.
So second paragraph, the very last number should be 11,000.
Correct.
And then
for a total of 36.
And then, but the resolution, the now therefore be it resolved paragraph is accurate the way it is.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Very sharp eye, Mr. DiFilippo.
Thank you.
Is everyone clear on the change before we vote? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C10 is the authorization to participate in a joint municipal cooperative bidding program. May I have a motion, please? Anyone? And Levitan, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? I thought C9 was the one here. No, C8 was individuals. We're good? Oh, okay, that's okay. Okay. C10 is the authorization to participate in a joint municipal. Okay. C10 is the authorization to participate in a joint municipal cooperative bidding program. May I have a motion, please? Oh, I did? Great. That's okay. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C11 is the authorization to enter into a cooperative purchase. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C12 is the authorization of award of Nassau County Director of School Facilities Purchasing Consortium Cooperative. May I have a motion, please? Amartolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C13 are the authorizations for piggybacking. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C14 is the acceptance of a donation of a freezer. May I have a motion, please? Amartolo, seconded by Chris Filippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C15 is the approval of the disposal of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment and books. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you all for attending our meeting for the long haul.
C16?
I don't have.
No, I,
Thank you.
listen.
Okay. C16 is an emergency resolution with respect to ventilation. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C17 is the approval of the disclosure and consent agreement. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Gershon, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Are there any others? Okay.
C18.
C18 is the intermunicipal agreement regarding Renew. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Filippo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? I'm putting it down slowly just in case.
No, it's done.
Okay, thank you all. This was a lengthy meeting, but an important one. We appreciate your time.